There are abounding changes in the global economy, but none quite like the double jolt that struck with two major events in recent weeks: the lifting of decades-long economic sanctions on Iran and the launch of the China-led AIIB. To delve deeper into how these two events will reshape the world and some valid options to prevent economies from falling behind with the changes, we turn to Professor Shin Se. Thank you for joining us today, Professor.
Pleasure.
Well, first of all, the world is rapidly preparing to open doors and plan new projects with Iran. Could you outline some of the major ways an unshackled Iran will have on the global economy? Let's start with the big picture.
Well, Iran is a pretty big country, about 1.6 million square meter, which is about 16 times the size of South Korea. Oil reserve of about 140 billion barrel, which is about fifth in the world. And oil production is about almost 4 million barrel per day, which is about also the fifth or sixth. So in terms of oil reserve and oil production, Iran is a pretty big country. But contrary to that, the size of GDP for Iran is about 400 billion, which is about 1/3 of the size of Korea. And the trade is even lower. The trade volume is about 150 billion, which is about 1/4 of Korea. So, economic size and the trade volume is relatively smaller compared to Korea, but their huge oil reserve and oil production capacity is the driving force for the global economy. So the removal of sanctions against Iran most effect will be felt in the oil market, whether how much the oil price will be impacted by that. I think that is the key issue concerning the Iranian removal of sanctions.
Well, when it comes to trade or investment or projects with Iran, in the past, Korea, we did have a very flourishing relationship, but now it's time to make up for lost time, but at the same time, times have changed.
Right.
So what should we focus on?
Well, bilateral trade between Korea and Iran has been recently reduced to about $6 billion. And about 5 years ago, it was about 12 billion, or twice the current. But even, 12 billion a year trade between two countries is less than 1% of Korean trade. So trade-wise, even if we are able to expand bilateral trade opportunities, it is very difficult for them to be even double them. If it doubled them, still, 1% or less than Korean trade. So I expected, the unshackling of Iranian sanction would not have dramatic effect upon Korean export to or import from Iran. Rather, I think the Korea-Iranian relationship should be focused upon investment, and I think there will be a lot of chances and needs on the part of Iran to modernize their infrastructure and modernize their industry and the development of information and communication industry. So I think in that area, Korea has a lot of opportunities in the future because of that removal of the sanction.
Right, and you also mentioned cultural exchanges being one of the key?
Because the investment and the cooperation between two countries is not just a matter of money. It's a matter of trust between two countries. So in order to build up higher trust between two countries, I think we need to have a deeper exchanges of culture, deeper understanding of the people. So that's why I think, the exchanges of culture, exchange of students, exchanges of government officials. So that kind of interrelationship building is very crucial to expand our investment opportunities and broadening our economic activities in Iran.
Right, the basics in business. Moving on to the AIIB, or the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. It's a giant. It's being led by China.
Right.
And of course, there are a lot of question marks and there's a lot of pressure on China. Is China feeling it right now?
Well, on the part of China, it's not a pressure for them to expand in that area. It is the destiny and it is their venture and necessity to transform for China from labor-intensive to capital-intensive, and from the manufacturing to finances. So for China to become one step, up upgrade their economic statuses. I think that kind of building institutions to broaden their investment opportunity in that infrastructure is pretty necessary and inevitable, as the United States has done that about 60 years ago, right after the Second World War, like building IMF and the World Bank, and after in 1960s, AIIB. It's the same purpose. So for China, developing an initiation of AIIB is a kind of a necessary step for their enhancement of economic stance.
Great power comes great responsibility. It's going to be a lot of burden for the countries involved. And of course, there's other large banks like the World Bank and AIIB and of course the AIIB. What about the member countries and the countries not taking part in any of these big bodies?
Well, not being able to be a member of either party could be a benefit and it could also be a disadvantage, because not being a member of both institutions, they could had a kind of bargaining power between the two, but also at the same time, it could be a disadvantage, because not being a member, they'll be able to lose a lot of privileges being a member. So I think there are pros and cons not being able to member of either institutions, I think.
Okay, let's speak about the fifth largest shareholder of AIIB. I think we know what country we're talking about. Where does that country stand? And what can it do to maintain that status?
Well, Korea, the partnership in IMF or World Bank is about 1%. In terms of ranking, 16th, in the partnership. But in terms of AIIB, Korea being the fifth largest member, that means that Korea has a lot of bigger, voices in AIIB. But you have to remember that, the AIIB is led by China, and China is pretty notorious in her precariousness. So it is very difficult to predict on the part of, decision-making process in China. Another factor is that, it is really difficult to be independent from politics and diplomacies involving China. So for Korea, even the share is bigger than Korea's role in IMF or AIIB. Still, we have to face a lot of unpredictability in being a member of AIIB. So that is the challenge for Korean government to make a full advantage of the membership in AIIB, I think.
Right, a bold new era for the world and, of course, Korea. Professor Shin Se, thank you so much for your time and your insights.